Thanks for joining the Two Nerds podcast. This is Chris in a, once again, even more different setting. You're listening to the Two Nerds podcast brought to you by Vorpal Gaming in Knox, Indiana. If you like hearing my melodious voice, I'm available on the following platforms: Anchor, Breaker, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, Spotify, and YouTube. We are on YouTube. I have been working on the YouTube channel, trying to get some more of the podcasts moved over. We also have our Teespring store. There will be a link in the description of both the YouTube video and the podcast. Words are gone already. Both in both descriptions, but it's Vorpal Gaming in the Teespring store. It's themed merchandise. I'll be working on some RPG style shirts and apparel here soon. I've been doing a lot of Warhammer themed stuff, so let's see. This is a bonus episode this week. I woke up super early. Let's talk about that actually first before we get too far into this. So I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I have post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and what's called combat-related anxiety. And by and large, like, it's whatever. I can function just fine. I am not, like, a broken man by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm not telling everybody this so they can thank me for my service. Keep your thanks to yourself. I appreciate it, but I would prefer if you thank other people. I just did a thing. Like, that's how I look at it. It was a chapter of my life, and it's over now. But the reason I bring it up is because there are times where I just don't sleep. And that's a big part of it. So, like, last night, I went to bed at, like, 9 o'clock and woke up at 2:30. Sometimes I wake up at midnight. And it's brief periods. Like, I'm sure there's some kind of pattern to be pulled from it somehow, but I've never sat and studied it, because usually it's like a week or two and then everything goes back to normal for a few months and then whatever, so like, cool. And again, I'm not saying this to be like, oh, look at me, I'm a veteran, because I know plenty of veterans. Like, it's just, this is a function of my life, and I'm explaining to you why you get the bonus episode. I woke up this morning, was able to get all my schoolwork done because I started my classes back up so I can finish my degree finally, and walked the dog and lifted weights and did all the things that I normally do, and got them done early enough that I was like, hell yeah, we're going to do a bonus episode. As usual, we got that sweet rabbit coffee from the roaster next door. And this camera, like, it's cutting off my head. I'm sorry, guys. This isn't my normal setup. Not that, like, my setups are super good, because I'm ass with cameras and videos and stuff. But this isn't my normal setup. The door in the back is just blocking off some light. I just wanted to get this video worked on. Wanted to get something up for everybody. So I just kind of rushed into it. And so what we're going to talk about, we're going to do the terrain talk. Maybe I can, let's maybe aim it up. There we go. Now at least it's not cutting my fucking head off. We're going to do the terrain talk that was scheduled for next week. I've got some core rules pulled up. We're going to talk about industrial terrain. And we're going to just kind of go over it. I'm going to put a little poll in the Anchor description. It should show up on, like, the people who listening in Spotify should show up there. How do you feel about it? You'll have different options. It'll run for the rest of the month. I don't mean to stammer so much either. I'm running on buckets of caffeine right now. Yep. So, industrial terrain. Let's talk about it. What is it? First of all, industrial terrain. Let me find the rule on it, because I have them all pulled up. Common terrain features. Industrial terrain. Industrial structure. It is area terrain, and it has scalable, breachable, dense cover, and defensible. So scalable is infantry, beast, swarm, and fly models can all be set up or end a move on top of this terrain feature, excluding ground floor. So what that means is the feature itself, like if I have a dreadnought, I cannot put my dreadnought on the actual feature unless that feature is table level ground floor, or it's like a hill or something, you know. So a good example of that would be the new Orc terrain set. They've got the little like oil drill things, oil wells. Those are a great example of what would be an industrial feature. And they have little platforms on them, and you can put models on the platform. But according to 40k rules, only infantry, beast, swarm, and models with the fly keyword can actually... Sorry, I just happened to catch something that caught my attention. Can actually be set up on the feature outside of ground floor. The second part of that... Oh no! I'm a clown. I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know how to fucking tie my shoes. The second part of that... So, again, only infantry, beast, swarm models can be set up or any move on top of obstacles terrain feature with this trait. Only infantry, beast, and swarm models and models that can fly can be set up or any move in the upper floors of an area terrain feature with this trait. Infantry, beast, and swarm models can move through floor, ceilings, and gantries of this feature without impediment. You get the point. So what that means, though, is you can climb ladders, move up floors. You do have to account for your vertical distance moving, but you basically can treat the floors as if they weren't there when moving. And you just kind of just measure straight vertical distance and then move it. That's what that means. Basically, you know, again, it's just lets infantry, beasts, and swarms have some flexibility when moving on, around, or through that terrain feature. It also has breachable. Breachable is an interesting keyword, but we'll get to that in a little bit. Infantry, beasts, and swarm units can move through the walls, girders, chains, and foliage of this terrain feature without impediment. So again, infantry, beast, and swarm can move through walls, girders, chains, and foliage. What this means, so like in a forest, for example, you have actual tree models on the footprint. Infantry can treat those trees as if they weren't there. You know, so basically it's to represent infantry walking around, beasts and swarms walking around, going through cracks and crevices and walls, stuff like that. So again, using the Orc oil well drill thing, this is sign language for oil well drill. For those actually just listening, I'm just flailing my arms like an idiot. But oil well drill feature. So let's say it's a 4-inch square and you want to advance your model. If it's infantry, beast, or swarm, you can just move straight line through the feature, ignoring the fact that it's there. Which is pretty neat. Again, it's just to represent an infantry unit or model's ability to kind of wiggle through little crevices and cracks and stuff. Dense cover. Okay, so like woods also have this. And this has a trigger which I don't like. If this terrain feature is at least 3 inches in height, and that's the trigger I don't like. Like, it should just have dense cover or not have it. There shouldn't be a height requirement. I guess ultimately I understand why it has a height requirement, but at the same time it's just, hey, come on. If it's not 3 inches, it's just not industrial. That's super easy. But you subtract 1 from the hit roll when resolving attack with a ranged weapon unless you can draw straight lines 1 millimeter in thickness to every part of at least one model's base in the target unit from a single point on the attacking model's base or hull without any of those lines passing through or over any part of the terrain feature with this trait. So models that are on or within a feature ignore the penalty if they are targeting another model in the feature. I'm just paraphrasing now. I'm not going to sit here and read it. Basically, what this means, and this is super weird because you have to draw the lines, which implies that it's a line of sight based penalty. And this is where it gets interesting, and I've covered this, and I'm going to talk about it again. So let's take a basilisk. It ignores line of sight. If you're on the other side of an industrial feature, rules as written, you have to subtract -1 for dense cover. So like if your basilisk is behind a wall and cannot even see me, but I'm parked in a woods, that woods imposes a -1 hit penalty to the basilisk. And I don't know that that's rules as intended. Maybe it is. I think it's a little silly for a lot of reasons. I think it's silly because this is a unit, for example, that ignores line of sight, so I would assume that it could ignore line of sight based penalties. So like if you have dense cover, you have to draw lines from point A to point B, blah, 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 blah. But if I can't even see you, how do you get a -1 hit penalty for being in a feature? Like logically it doesn't make sense. Logically it seems like if it ignores line of sight, it would ignore dense cover, and I've heard both sides of this. I know people that agree with me, I know people that disagree with me, I know people who say, well, rules is written, it says this is the way we should play it. And I've said this 1,000 times. Any event that I TO, I will always rule that if it ignores line of sight, it ignores dense cover granted by terrain features. And I've given my logic for it. I've given my reasoning for it. My logic and reasoning is basically, hey, like, artillery doesn't give two shits if you're in a forest. And this is from personal experience. Like I've watched mortars and artillery shells slam into woods and they just friggin' obliterate. Like they do what they do. They don't care whether or not you're in a forest. They don't care whether or not you're in haze or smoke, because they're not relying on line of sight to shoot you. They're relying on, calculations and spotters and all kinds of other different things, computers. There's a lot of things there that they rely on to be able to hit their targets. So they don't need line of sight, and they don't care about line of sight. And that's from a realistic standpoint. Now, I know that it's a game and we can't always apply like real world logic to the game. But by and large, I found if you just stop and think about things and try to apply a little bit of real world logic, most of the rules will make sense. There's a few that don't, but most of them do. And there's a handful that don't, that they exist simply because it's a game. Like there are rules, and I can't think of any off the top of my head, but there are rules in the game that exist because it is a game, not because it's trying to simulate anything real. And that's fine, But again, if we just apply some common sense, it makes sense. And if you look at most of the models and units that ignore line of sight, most of them aren't that oppressive. Basilisks are okay. Like they're not amazing, but they're not terrible. Like they're okay. For 125 points, you get a D6 shots, strength 9, -2, D3 damage, and you get to roll 2 dice and pick the highest when determining its number of shots. So you're going to get 3 to 4 shots most of the time. But it is still ballistic skill 4. So by and large, like, it's not gross. Whirlwinds, not gross. It's 2d3 shots, strength 7, -1, 2 damage. Like, they're not impressive. Rocket truck squig buggies are arguably, like, I know everybody's super high on them, and again, that's a thing I've covered also. I think that they're doing well right now, simply because so many tournaments are just copying the GW Open style terrain. I think if TOs and events out there started using rules as written for terrain, like I think if you started seeing, excuse me, 14 to 15 pieces of terrain on every table, because it says you should have one feature for every 12-inch square on your board. And in a 4 by 5, which is roughly what the boards are, they're roughly 4 feet by 5 feet, so you're talking about somewhere in the realm of 15 to 18 pieces of terrain based off the size of the board. If TO started running that, squig buggies become worthless. Maybe not worthless, but they get taken down a peg, because they don't have these massive line of sight blocking footprints that they can just park behind and shoot. You know, and really, like, I don't know. Again, I know a lot of people are really high on them. They have a huge upgrade. Don't misunderstand me. I think they're way better than they were in the last edition. But I don't think they're as good as people are making them out to be. I know plenty of people that are like, oh, they're so gross, blah, 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 blah. And I am over here just like, if they're that good, why are they struggling to win events? Not that they're doing poorly, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying they're not winning events. If they're that good and they're that oppressive, this should be the new AdMech. But it's not. So it's a solid unit that's very points efficient, that has a lot of shots that ignore line of sight, and it is doing well right now because right now a lot of TOs and a lot of events are copying the 10 to 12 piece boards that GW has been using for their opens, and by doing that, they're basically putting melee armies in the forefront, and then anything that can ignore line of sight. So anything that's good anyway. When you consider the fact that a squig buggy does, I think it's 3d6 strength 5 neg 2 damage shots, and can ignore line of sight, and a lot of people are just bringing infantry to these events because of how the terrain's laid out. Like it's orcs being orcs. Like, it's a unit that's very good at countering what the current meta might be. But again, AdMech's still doing what AdMech's doing, so maybe not. Sorry about the little tirade there. Industrial also has defensible, which lets you set to defend or hold steady if it's an infantry model, and every infantry model in the unit has to be on or in the area terrain feature to use it. I forgot that it actually had the keyword infantry there. Basically what that means is when you're charged, you can either hold steady or set to defend. If you hold steady, your Overwatch attacks hit on 5. If you set to defend, you can add 1 to your hit rolls in the next fight phase. And you can only do that if you're not already engaged when a charge is declared. So, pretty interesting. It's a feature trait that I know a lot of the people that I know that play forget about being able to do that. So it's something to keep in mind, especially like people out there, the few Tau holdouts that are there, or the idiots like me who are getting back into Tau while they're terrible. If you're running stealth suits, for example, stealth suits are infantry. If you've got them all on or within a terrain feature, they can overwatch on 5s when you're shooting or when they're charged. So it's just a thing to keep in mind. Very solid ability. So I like industrial. I like it a lot. I like it because it allows you to put a big thing on the board without it being massive. So like I can put, like, I use energy drink cans, and I make little like Prometheum tanks out of them and stuff like that, and then I just put a footprint underneath them that basically, whatever the size of an energy drink is, put it maybe a ½ inch in every direction, or maybe an inch in every direction. So it's not a massive footprint, but we're losing the camera again. it does take up a chunk of board. It does block vehicles from being able to move. It does a lot of different things. Lets infantry move through it. Does impose a -1 to hit penalty when shooting through it. So again, like, you can put vehicles behind it and they at least get some benefit to being near it. You know, it's a very diverse piece of terrain. I like them a lot. I use them on boards. I typically either use woods or industrial. I don't typically put both on a board because woods are a little bit different animal. They give the dense cover, but they also have difficult terrain, which makes you lose 2 inches from your move and charge and advance and blah 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 blah. So you get difficult terrain, and then typically they're not. Woods, in my experience, don't block line of sight, whereas an industrial piece can. So one of the things I like about the industrial, like I said, is that, like, I can get to, like, the oil refinery, for example. I can get one of those big oil wells. That's, again, the oil well sign language, as I'm double fisting myself. Anyway, you can get one of those. It's big enough that you can actually hide, like, a venerable dreadnought behind it. And then if it's not, like, if you're not hiding it completely behind it and you're poking out so you can shoot, if you're touched in, you can ignore the -1, but also take a -1 when somebody shoots at you. So it's a very versatile piece of terrain that offers a lot of benefit. I know a lot of people don't think -1 is that good, like, whatever. And I've heard people say that, like, oh, whatever, man, -1's not that good. Maybe not, but it's better than nothing. Like, ruins don't give anything to vehicles, so you know, whatever. It's one of those where that's why I like it, though. I like it because it's a terrain feature that can give a benefit to every model, because for whatever reason, dense cover affects any model in it, not just infantry. Whereas light cover, and actually, I wonder if there was a change here. When attack made with a ranged weapon, I will have to look and see, because light cover doesn't have the infantry trigger that it used to have, at least not on this site I'm looking at, which is interesting. I am going to scroll up. When attack made with a ranged weapon, wounds a model that is receiving the benefit. So I need to see receiving the benefits of cover. There we go. It's in the area terrain section. Infantry, beast, and swarm models receive the benefits of cover from area terrain features while they are within it. And then if the type of cover isn't specified, it's just defaulted to light cover. That was in an FAQ. So there it is. Infantry, beast, and swarm models. So that's it. That's all that's getting the benefits of cover. It's interesting. Sorry, I'm way out on a tangent at this point. I wanted to get back down here. Ruined walls are another thing that's kind of interesting, because they have defense line, breachable, dense cover, defensible, unstable position. So defense line, you can make a charge move against a unit within an inch of this feature and can fight if within 2 inches of an enemy. And basically what that means is you can fight through the wall. I think the oil pipes or whatever, the pipelines have it. Breachable, you can move through it. Dense cover, so it's -1 to shoot through if you can draw line of sight to it. It has defensible and unstable position. So ruined walls are kind of neat, because they're basically like a barricade and fuel pipe that give dense cover instead of light and heavy cover. And really, I would argue you could consolidate all of those together. I understand why you have two separate features, but really I think you could just consolidate those together. I'm sorry, again, I'm looking up dense cover. Subtract 1. Yep, it does specify. I just wanted to make sure dense cover specified ranged attacks. So But no, I just wanted to kind of go over industrial. I don't see it on a lot of boards. I definitely don't see it on a lot of tournament boards, especially with everybody going to GW style terrain. I've said before I'm not going to do it. I don't have anything against it. I don't think it's terrible. Excuse me again. I think it is perfect for what GW is trying to accomplish, but I don't want my tables to just be GW tables. I don't want the game to be that homogenized that no matter where you go, you're just always playing the same game. I feel like that's boring. And I also have told you before, I feel like the board itself should almost be like a third player in the game, or just a, it should provide an experience when you play. It shouldn't just be some random bullshit that's on the table and it's just like, cool, here, do it. That was the issue with 8th edition, was that the terrain was largely pointless. So that's it for today. Like I just wanted to touch on industrial, talk about how they work and why I like them. So it's one of those where I think they're great. I think you should probably consider putting them on your boards. I would argue that if you do, either make them solid, like I said, like a horizontal or 2 vertical soda cans to make like a grain silo or something even. You know, some kind of big structure that blocks some kind of line of sight, but also has a footprint that sticks out past to impose a -1 penalty. And again, I always envision that -1 penalty basically being like haze or smog or any other thing that might be permeating from the feature itself that would make it hard to see things, which again is probably why I argue that if it ignores line of sight, it ignores dense cover. But tell me what you think. If you're on YouTube, drop a comment in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about dense cover and line of sight and industrial terrain features. If you're listening on Spotify, just answer the poll, man. All right, guys. I appreciate you taking the time. Also, this is my lovely door. It's, again, just a block light from hitting the camera. I'll be back in my normal area next week. I just, like I said, rushed. So I will talk to you guys next week.